In southern Thailand, deep within palm forests where the mist never fully lifts, there is a village where pregnant women are forbidden to step outside after sunset. They say the villagers do not fear the dark. They fear the souls that were never born. When night falls, the sound of a newborn crying drifts from the forest. And if a mother answers, the child inside her may no longer belong to the world of the living. Chapter 1. The Road That Refused the Living. The road into Ban Thong did not welcome travelers. It did not curve gently like the paths leading to other villages. Instead, it cut through the palm forest like a scar, a strip of hardened red earth that seemed perpetually damp, as if something beneath the soil still bled. Even in the dry season, mist hovered low over the ground, clinging to ankles, drifting across the road in thin veils that parted reluctantly as vehicles passed. Prossert slowed the truck as they crossed the broken wooden bridge at the edge of the village boundary. The engine noise seemed too loud for the silence waiting beyond it. Molly rested both hands beneath her swollen belly. 7 months. The child shifted inside her as if reacting to something she could not see. "Almost there," Prossert said. His voice sounded forced, swallowed quickly by the stillness. Beyond the bridge stood a weathered wooden sign half-eaten by termites. Faded red paint formed letters barely readable beneath streaks of mildew. Ban Thung. Someone had nailed a strip of cloth across the lower half. Dark stains spread through the fabric, stiff and brown with age. Molly looked away. The air changed the moment they crossed the boundary. It grew colder, damp with the smell of stagnant water and rotting leaves. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. The silence was so complete it pressed against her ears until she felt the urge to swallow just to hear something alive. The houses appeared slowly through the fog, raised wooden structures on stilts. Their walls gray with weather and neglect. No children played beneath them. No laundry hung to dry. No cooking smoke drifted upward. Only doors, closed. Watching. Prossert parked beside their new home. A narrow stilt house leaning slightly to one side as if tired of standing. The wood beneath the windows had been scratched deeply in several places. Long parallel grooves cut into the grain. "Probably dogs," he muttered. Molly did not answer. She had not seen a single dog since they arrived. As she stepped down from the truck, the child inside her shifted violently. A tight pulling sensation ran across her abdomen, sharp enough to steal her breath. She turned toward the forest. The palm trees stood dense and unmoving, their fronds frozen in the airless dusk. Between the trunks, darkness pooled unnaturally thick, swallowing depth and distance. For a moment, only a moment, she thought she saw something pale between the trees. Then it was gone. The village remained silent as they carried their belongings inside. Even the floorboards seemed to absorb their footsteps instead of echoing them. Inside, the air smelled faintly of damp earth and old incense. Someone had left offerings at the far corner of the room, a cracked ceramic bowl. Wilted jasmine garlands turned brown, and 3 sticks of incense burned down to ash long ago. "Previous owners," Prossert said quickly. "Just old habits." Molly nodded, though the smell of the incense seemed fresh. Dusk fell too quickly. The last light vanished behind the tree line as if swallowed whole, leaving the village submerged in a thick blue darkness. No electric lights flickered on in neighboring houses. No radios played. No voices drifted through the night. Only silence. And then, a knock. 3 slow taps. Molly froze. Prossert opened the door. An elderly woman stood outside, her frame thin as bundled sticks, her skin folded and darkened like dried bark. Wisps of silver hair clung to her scalp. Her eyes reflected the dim light with a dull, glassy sheen that made it difficult to tell where she was looking. "I am Sanjay," she said. Her voice sounded dry, as though unused. She did not greet them. She did not smile. Her gaze dropped immediately to Molly's stomach. The child inside shifted again. Sanjay stepped closer without invitation. The smell of old smoke and something sour clung to her clothing. "You must listen carefully," she whispered. Her hand rose, trembling, and stopped inches from Molly's belly, not touching, but hovering, as if feeling heat from a hidden fire. After sunset, you do not go outside. Silence pressed in around them. And if you hear a baby crying, she continued, her voice lowering further, you must not answer it. Molly felt the skin along her arms tighten. Sanjay's eyes lifted slowly to meet hers. A pregnant woman carries two souls, she said. One belongs to this world. A long pause followed. And the other, she whispered, belongs to those still waiting. The wind moved through the palms for the first time since their arrival. Behind Sanjay, the darkness between the trees seemed to shift. Prasert laughed awkwardly. Grandmother, we appreciate the advice, but… Sanjay turned sharply toward him. The laugh died in his throat. Her voice emerged colder than the night air. This village has rules, she said. They were not made for the living. She stepped backward into the darkness. No footsteps sounded as she retreated. Within seconds, she was gone. The silence returned, thicker now. Heavier. Molly closed the door with shaking hands. Night settled over Ban Thung like a lid. She lay awake long after Prasert slept, staring into the darkness, listening to the silence pressing against the walls. Then, sometime after midnight, from deep within the forest, came the faint sound of an infant crying. Soft, weak, and impossibly close. Inside her womb, the child stirred in answer. Chapter 2. The warning that should not be ignored. Morning in Ban Thung did not arrive with birdsong. It seeped slowly into the village like diluted light filtering through dirty water. The fog had not lifted. Instead, it clung lower to the ground, coiling around the stilts of the houses like something reluctant to leave. Molly had not slept. The sound of the infant crying from the forest still echoed in her mind, thin, broken, and wrong. It had not sounded like a living child. It sounded hollow, as though it came from a throat that had never drawn breath. Prasert insisted he had heard nothing. Just wind, he said. But there had been no wind. Now, in the gray morning light, Molly stood near the doorway watching the tree line. The palms remained perfectly still. No leaves rustled. No insects moved through the air. The village seemed suspended between breaths. Her child shifted inside her again, not with the gentle rolling movement she had grown used to, but with sudden, sharp jolts, like flinches. She pressed her palm against her stomach. It's all right, she whispered. The words sounded unconvincing. A shadow moved at the corner of the house. Molly turned. Sanjay stood beneath the stilts, staring upward. The old woman had arrived without footsteps, without sound. Her eyes were fixed on Molly's belly with a quiet intensity that made the air feel thinner. You heard it, Sanjay said. It was not a question. Molly hesitated. Sanjay's gaze hardened. You must not answer if it calls again. Molly swallowed. What is it? The old woman did not respond immediately. Instead, she reached into the woven basket hanging from her arm and withdrew a small bundle tied with white thread. Inside were dried herbs, a strip of red cloth, and a tiny carved wooden charm in the shape of a child with no face. Sanjay climbed the stairs slowly and stepped inside without waiting to be invited. She hung the charm above the doorway. For protection, she murmured. The air inside the house grew colder. From what? Molly asked. Sanjay's fingers paused midair. Her voice lowered to a brittle whisper. There are spirits that wander, she said. Spirits that died before they were born. Spirits that were never given names. She tied the red cloth around the charm. They search for warmth, for breath, for a body to enter. Molly felt a tightening deep in her abdomen. Sanjay continued. A pregnant woman carries a doorway. The words seemed to absorb the light around them. Outside, something creaked, wood shifting though nothing moved. Molly forced a laugh. These are old beliefs. Sanjay turned slowly toward her. You heard it crying. Silence stretched between them. From somewhere in the distance came the dull thud of hammering. Molly looked toward the sound. Two men were sealing wooden boards across the windows of a nearby house, nailing them shut from the outside. Who lives there? She asked. Sanjay's expression did not change. No one now. The hammering continued. Each strike echoed across the silent village like a lid being nailed closed. Molly felt the baby shift violently again. A ripple moved beneath her skin, not a kick, but a slow dragging motion. Her breath caught. Sanjay noticed. The old woman's face tightened. "You must obey the rules," she said. "After sunset, doors stay closed, windows sealed, no answering voices from outside." "And if someone calls for help?" Molly asked. Sanjay's eyes clouded with something older than fear. "They will not be someone you know." A sudden gust of cold air swept through the doorway, though the trees outside remained motionless. The charm above the door began to sway. Back and forth. Back and forth. Molly stared at it. The faint smell of damp soil and something faintly sour filled the room. Sanjay stepped back toward the stairs. "Tonight," she said, "you will hear more clearly." Her gaze lingered on Molly's stomach. "They know you are here now." The old woman descended and disappeared into the fog. The hammering stopped. The silence that followed felt deeper than before, as if the village itself were listening. Inside her womb, the child shifted again. Then stilled. Outside, from somewhere within the palm forest, came a faint sound like breath being drawn through a wet throat. Molly closed the door. And for the first time since arriving in Banthong, she understood. The warning had not been given to protect her. It had been given to protect what was still waiting in the dark.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 3. Footprints Beneath the Window. The second night fell faster than the first. By late afternoon, the fog had already begun to thicken, swallowing the space between the houses and turning the palm trees into tall, smudged silhouettes. Light faded not gradually but abruptly, as though someone had drawn a dark cloth across the sky. Prossert secured the windows before sunset. Wooden shutters creaked shut. A rusted latch clicked into place. He moved with the hurried determination of a man pretending not to believe what he feared. "It's just how villages are," he said, avoiding Molly's eyes. "Extra precautions." The hammer lay near the doorway. "Just in case." Molly watched the forest while he worked. The tree line seemed closer tonight. The darkness between the trunks looked thicker, like pooled ink slowly spreading outward. Inside her womb, the baby remained still. Too still. The red cloth charm above the doorway swayed slightly, though the air inside the house was unmoving. The faint scent of dried herbs mixed with the persistent smell of damp soil rising through the floorboards. Sunset arrived without color. Darkness pressed against the walls. For a long time, nothing happened. No wind, no insects, no distant voices. Even the wooden frame of the house remained silent, as though the structure itself held its breath. Prossert fell asleep quickly, exhaustion claiming him in heavy, uneven breaths. Molly lay awake beside him, listening. Time stretched. Then, a sound. Soft. Dragging. Not from the forest. From beneath the house. Molly's throat tightened. She pushed herself slowly upright, careful not to wake her husband. The sound came again, something brushing against the packed earth below, followed by a faint scraping, as if small fingers traced the support posts. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She held her breath. Silence returned. Seconds passed. Minutes. Then, from just outside the wall beside her. Tap. A pause. Tap, tap. The sound came from beneath the window. Molly's eyes fixed on the wooden panels. The knocking was delicate, hesitant, almost polite, like a child unsure whether it was welcome. Tap. 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 Inside her belly, the baby jolted violently. She gasped and clutched her stomach. The movement was sudden and sharp. Not the rolling shift of a fetus but a convulsive jerk, as if something inside had startled. The tapping stopped. The silence that followed felt enormous. Molly slid her feet onto the floor. The wood was cold beneath her skin. Each step toward the window felt heavier than the last. Don't answer voices from outside. Sanjay's warning pressed into her mind. She stopped inches from the wall. Another sound came, softer now. A wet inhale. Then a faint whimper. Not from far away. From directly below the window frame. Molly's hand rose despite herself. Her fingers hovered over the wooden panel, feeling the chill radiating through it. On the other side, something shifted in the dirt. A slow dragging sound circled the base of the house. Her breathing became shallow. Then, a tiny handprint appeared on the lower plank. Molly recoiled. The mark formed as if pressed from the outside, a small, mud-dark impression, each finger thin and elongated. The palm print lingered for several seconds before another appeared beside it. And another. They climbed slowly upward. The wood creaked softly as the impressions rose, one after the other, as though something were pulling itself toward the window. Inside her womb, the baby began to move frantically. Not kicking. Scraping. A rolling, twisting motion rippled beneath her skin. "Molly?" Prossert murmured in his sleep. She could not answer. The handprints reached the level of the window seam. Stopped. The wood trembled. A faint sound emerged from the other side, not quite crying. Not quite breathing. "M.A.?" The voice was wet and broken, as though forced through a throat filled with soil. Molly staggered backward, pressing both hands over her mouth to keep from screaming. The charm above the doorway began to swing violently. Back and forth. Back and forth. From beneath the house came the sound of something circling, dragging. Pausing, dragging again, as if searching for another way inside. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The charm fell still. The air returned. The handprints remained. Dark, small, unmistakably real. Prossert stirred awake. "Did you hear something?" Molly stared at the wall, unable to speak. Outside, the fog pressed close against the house. From deep within the palm forest came the distant cry of an infant. This time, it did not sound alone. And inside her womb, something answered with a slow, deliberate movement. Chapter 4. The coffin that would not stay silent. Dawn did not bring relief. The fog thinned just enough to reveal what the night had left behind. Prossert opened the door cautiously, as though expecting something to push back from the other side. The morning air was damp and cold, carrying the sour smell of wet earth. Molly followed him onto the narrow wooden steps. The handprints were still there. Small, mud-dark, rising along the outer wall beneath the window, stopping exactly at the seam of the wooden panel. Prossert stared at them without speaking. He crouched and touched one. The mud flaked away beneath his finger. Fresh. Neither of them mentioned the sound from the night. Neither of them mentioned the whisper. Across the narrow lane, several villagers stood gathered beneath a stilt house. They spoke in hushed tones, heads bowed together, their expressions drawn tight with something deeper than grief. A long white cloth hung from the front beam of the house, a signal of death. Molly felt a chill crawl up her spine. Sanjay emerged from the mist behind them, as silent as ever. Her eyes moved from the handprints to Molly's face, then to the curve of her belly. "It has begun to notice you," she said softly. Prossert straightened. "What happened?" Sanjay turned toward the gathered villagers. "Tongchai died in the night." The name seemed to ripple through the air. Molly had seen the man once the previous day, thin, stooped, carrying a bundle of firewood. He had not looked ill. He had not looked old enough to die. "How?" Prossert asked. Sanjay did not answer immediately. Instead, she said, "The funeral will be tonight." Molly felt the child shift sharply inside her. A memory surfaced. The distant hammering the day before, windows being sealed, boards nailed from the outside. "Why at night?" she asked. Sanjay's gaze sharpened. "So the sun will not see what must be done." By dusk, the village had transformed. No lamps burned, no cooking fires flickered. The houses stood dark and sealed, their inhabitants withdrawn behind closed shutters. From Tongchai's home came the low murmur of chanting. Molly watched from behind her own shuttered window. Men carried the coffin out just after nightfall. It was not polished wood like those in town funerals. It was rough, hastily built, bound with thick iron nails driven deep along the lid. Too many nails. The men did not carry it on shoulders. They held it away from their bodies, arms stiff, as if afraid of contact. A monk walked ahead of them, murmuring prayers under his breath, his voice barely audible beneath the heavy stillness of the night. The procession stopped in the clearing near the forest edge. Torches were lit. Their flames burned low and blue. Molly pressed her eye to the gap between the wooden slats. Sanjay stood beside the monk, clutching a string of prayer beads so tightly her knuckles shone pale. The coffin was lowered onto wooden supports. The chanting grew louder. The monk sprinkled water across the lid. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a sound emerged from inside the coffin. A dull scrape. The villagers stiffened. Another scrape followed, louder this time, dragging slowly across the inner wood. Molly's breath caught in her throat. Someone whispered a prayer. The coffin shuddered. A sharp thud struck the underside of the lid. Another. Then a violent rattling, as though something inside had awakened in blind panic. The monk's chanting rose urgently. The men stepped backward. A nail at the corner of the lid lifted slightly, then slammed back into place. From within came a muffled sound, not a cry, not a voice, but a wet choking noise like air forcing its way through mud. Molly clutched her stomach. Inside her womb, the baby convulsed. The coffin shook harder. A long, splintering scratch dragged from one end of the lid to the other. Someone screamed. The monk shouted an incantation and slammed both palms onto the wood. The rattling stopped instantly. Silence crashed down over the clearing. No one moved. No one breathed. After several seconds, the monk nodded once. The men stepped forward and drove additional nails into the lid. Each hammer strike echoed through the village like blows against bone. Molly stumbled away from the window, her heart pounding violently. Behind her ribs, something fluttered, not in her chest, but lower, deeper. She pressed both hands against her belly. The movement inside her had changed. It was no longer frantic. It was slow, deliberate, listening. Outside, the chanting resumed as the coffin was lifted again and carried toward the forest. Sanjay remained behind. She turned slowly toward Molly's house. Even through the wooden slats, Molly felt the old woman's eyes find her. When Sanjay spoke, her voice did not rise above a whisper. But Molly heard it clearly. "They must be sealed," she said. Her gaze dropped to Molly's stomach. "Or they will answer the call." From deep within the forest came a distant sound, faint, thin, and rising. An infant's cry. Then another. And another. Inside her womb, something shifted in recognition.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 5. The shape that circled the house. Night came early, as though the sun had chosen not to linger above Ban Thong. By the time the last dim light drained from the sky, the village had sealed itself again. Shutters closed, doors barred, lamps extinguished. Even the torches near the forest clearing had been removed, leaving the tree line swallowed by unbroken darkness. Inside the house, Prossert reinforced the latch and placed the hammer beside the doorway. "We're safe," he said, though he did not sound convinced. Molly sat on the sleeping mat, both hands resting over the taut curve of her belly. Since the funeral procession, the child had not moved with its usual rhythm. Instead, there were long stretches of stillness interrupted by slow, unsettling shifts, as if something inside were turning carefully, listening through flesh and bone. The red thread charm above the door hung motionless. The air felt heavy and damp, pressing against her lungs. Silence settled. It lasted long enough for her heartbeat to slow. Then, something brushed the outer wall. Not a knock. Not a scrape. A slow, dragging contact, like damp cloth sliding over wood. Molly froze. The sound moved along the length of the wall. Dragging. Pausing. Dragging again. It stopped beneath the window where the handprints had appeared the night before. Her breath became shallow. Inside her womb, the baby jerked violently. A sudden, sharp contraction tightened her abdomen. The sound resumed. This time on the opposite side of the house. Circling. Prossert sat upright. "Did you hear that?" Before she could answer, the sound passed beneath the floorboards. Something brushed the support posts. A faint vibration traveled through the wood into the soles of their feet. Then silence. Seconds passed. A minute. 2. Prossert forced a strained laugh. Maybe an animal. Molly shook her head slowly. There had been no footsteps. Only dragging. The charm above the door began to sway. Back and forth. Back and forth. The air grew colder. Outside, the sound returned, now unmistakably circling the house. It moved slowly, deliberately, hugging the perimeter as if tracing the boundaries of a cage. Dragging. Pause. Dragging. Molly felt the baby shift again, not in sudden kicks, but in a slow rolling motion that rippled from one side of her abdomen to the other, as though turning toward the sound. No, she whispered, pressing her palms firmly against her stomach. The movement stilled. The circling continued. On the far side of the house came a soft impact. Not heavy. Light. As if something had leaned its weight against the wall to listen. The wood creaked faintly. Prossert rose and took a step toward the door. "Don't," Molly whispered sharply. He stopped. The sound moved again, dragging across the front steps. Something brushed the lowest stair. Then another. A slow ascent. The boards creaked under pressure that seemed far too light to produce sound. The charm swung harder now. A faint smell drifted into the house, wet soil mixed with something faintly sweet and rotten. The sound reached the door. Stopped. Silence pressed inward from all sides. Molly could hear her own pulse roaring in her ears. Inside her womb, the baby moved again. Not violently. Not fearfully. But with a slow, answering shift. A faint sound came from the other side of the door. Not scratching. Not knocking. Breathing. Wet. Shallow. As though drawn through fluid. Prossert's hand tightened around the hammer. Neither of them moved. The breathing lingered for several long seconds. Then something slid downward along the wood. Dragging. Retreating. The steps creaked again as the unseen weight descended. The circling resumed, slower now. Wider, as if satisfied. Minutes passed. The sound drifted away toward the rear of the house, then into the darkness beyond. The charm stilled. The air warmed slightly. Only silence remained. Prossert exhaled shakily and set the hammer down. "It's gone," he said. Molly did not answer. Her eyes remained fixed on the door. Inside her womb, something shifted one last time. A slow, deliberate turn. As though settling into a more comfortable position. As though listening for the sound to return. Far beyond the houses, deep within the palm forest, an infant's cry rose into the night. This time, it did not sound hungry. It sounded patient. And for the first time, Molly understood the rhythm of the circling. It had not been searching for a way inside. It had been waiting for permission. Chapter 6. The Legend That Was Twisted. The third night after the funeral brought no breeze. No insects. No relief. The fog lay low across Ban Thung like a burial cloth. Even the stilts beneath the houses disappeared into the pale thickness, making the structures appear to float in the air. Molly had not slept. Each time she closed her eyes, she felt the slow circling return, not outside the house, but inside her thoughts, tracing the edges of her fear with patient familiarity. Prossert had stopped pretending. He spoke little, he listened constantly. And tonight, he refused to extinguish the oil lamp. The small flame trembled, casting unsteady shadows that stretched and recoiled along the walls like living things unsure of their shapes. Outside, the silence pressed heavily against the wood. Inside her womb, the child lay unnaturally still. Molly rested both hands over her stomach, waiting for movement that did not come. Then, from somewhere beyond the sealed shutters, came the faint sound of dragging. It did not circle the house tonight. It remained still, waiting. Prossert heard it too, his jaw tightened. The oil flame flickered violently. A shape passed across the thin line of light leaking through the window seam. Molly's breath caught. The shadow paused. Though the shutters were closed tight, a faint pale glow from the rising moon slipped through the gaps between the wooden slats. casting thin bars of light onto the packed earth outside. Something moved through that light. Not walking. Gliding. The lower portion of the shape did not separate into legs. It tapered into darkness. Molly's fingers tightened around the edge of the mat. The shape drifted past the window slowly. Its upper form indistinct, elongated, hunched, wrong in proportion, as though assembled from memory rather than flesh. Then it stopped. Just beyond the frame. The air inside the house grew colder. A faint wet sound emerged from the other side of the wall, not breathing. Not crying, but something in between. Inside her womb, the baby convulsed. Molly gasped and clutched her stomach. The movement was violent, a sudden twisting, as though the child had recoiled in terror. The shadow outside jerked. Then withdrew. The dragging sound resumed, retreating into the fog. Only after several long seconds did Molly realize she had been holding her breath. The next morning, Sanjay arrived before the fog lifted. She carried a bundle of incense and a small clay bowl filled with ash. Her eyes were ringed with exhaustion. "You saw it," she said. Molly did not deny it. Sanjay lit the incense and set it near the doorway. Smoke rose in thin threads that twisted unnaturally before drifting toward the floor. "The stories outsiders know are wrong," the old woman murmured. She traced a line of ash across the threshold. "You have heard of Beneeth?" Molly nodded. Every Thai child knew the legend, a woman who died in childbirth and returned, waiting for her husband in undying devotion. Sanjay shook her head slowly. "That is not what walks here." The smoke thickened. "In Ban Thong, we do not fear the mother who returns," she continued. "We fear what comes when the child does not live, and the spirit refuses to leave." Molly felt a tightening deep inside her abdomen. Sanjay's voice dropped to a whisper. "There are spirits that never breathed air, never opened their eyes, never heard their names spoken." Her gaze moved to Molly's belly. "They do not know they are dead." The words seemed to darken the room. "When they sense warmth, heartbeat, blood, they come close." Outside, the fog shifted against the stilts. "They listen," Sanjay said. Molly swallowed. "And if they find what they want?" Sanjay's fingers tightened around her prayer beads. "They do not take the child." Silence. "They enter." The oil lamp flickered though there was no wind. Molly felt the baby move again, slowly now. Cautiously, as if turning away from something only it could sense. Sanjay stepped back toward the stairs. "Do not let it see you invite it," she said. Molly's voice trembled. "Invite it how?" The old woman's eyes held hers. "By answering its voice." Sanjay descended into the thinning fog. The incense smoke continued to curl along the floor. Prosert stood unmoving near the door. Neither of them spoke. Beyond the tree line, the palms stood motionless under the pale daylight. But in the fading mist, just at the edge of sight, Molly thought she saw a faint shape lingering between the trunks. Waiting. Patient. Learning the rhythm of her breathing. Inside her womb, the child shifted once more. Slowly turning. As though trying not to be seen.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 7. The Woman Without Eyes. Sleep did not come gently. It pulled Molly downward like dark water. The oil lamp had burned low. Its flame trembled weakly, casting a dull amber glow that barely reached the corners of the room. Prosert slept beside her, his breathing uneven, as if chased through dreams he could not escape. Outside, the fog pressed against the walls. Inside, the air felt thick and damp, filling Molly's lungs with the scent of old incense and wet soil. Her eyes closed. Darkness swallowed her. And she was no longer inside the house. She stood barefoot on cold earth. The palm forest surrounded her. But the trees were wrong, their trunks stretched too tall, disappearing into a sky that did not exist. No stars, no moon, only a heavy blackness pressing downward. The ground beneath her feet was soft. Not mud. Ash. Each step released a faint gray cloud that drifted upward and dissolved into the dark. A sound reached her. Soft rocking. Back and forth. Back and forth. Molly turned. A woman sat beneath a dead palm tree. Her back faced Molly. Long black hair hung in damp strands down to her waist. Her body rocked slowly, rhythmically, as if soothing something in her arms. The rocking sound was wet. Sticky. "Molly?" The voice came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The woman continued rocking. Molly took a step closer. The air grew colder. The smell reached her then, sweet rot. Like flowers left too long in stagnant water. The woman's arms moved gently. Cradling. Soothing. A faint sound emerged from what she held. Not crying. Not breathing. A soft clicking noise, like a throat trying to remember how to swallow. Molly's chest tightened. She wanted to step back. Her feet would not move. The woman stopped rocking. Slowly, she turned. Her face was pale and stretched too tightly across her bones. Where her eyes should have been, there were only hollow sockets filled with darkness deeper than the night surrounding them. A thin line of dark fluid ran from each empty hollow, trailing down her cheeks and dripping from her jaw. Her mouth opened in a slow, cracking smile. Inside, her teeth were small and uneven, stained the color of damp earth. She lifted the bundle in her arms. It was wrapped in rotting cloth. Something inside shifted weakly. The cloth fell open. A tiny gray limb slid free. The skin was translucent. The fingers too long. The head lolled backward at an impossible angle. Its mouth opened. No sound came out. The woman tilted her head toward Molly. When she spoke, her voice sounded as though forced through soil. "Take it." Molly shook her head violently. "No." The woman's smile widened. Her empty sockets turned toward Molly's belly. "It hears you," she whispered. The bundle twitched. The tiny mouth opened again. This time, a wet inhalation escaped. Inside Molly's womb, something responded. A violent convulsion rippled across her abdomen. She screamed. The eyeless woman lurched forward. The bundle fell. Cold hands seized Molly's wrists. "Let it in." Molly woke screaming. The oil lamp had gone out. Darkness filled the room. Prossert jolted awake beside her. "Molly, what happened?" Her heart slammed against her ribs. Her breath came in sharp, shallow gasps. Her hands flew to her stomach. The baby moved frantically beneath her skin, twisting, jerking, recoiling. Then she felt it. Cold. She looked down. Faint black marks spread across the skin of her belly. Finger-shaped. Long. Too thin. Pressed from the inside. Prossert stared in horror. "What is that?" The marks darkened for several seconds, then slowly faded, dissolving back into her skin. The baby's movements slowed. Stopped. Silence filled the room. Outside, the fog pressed against the walls. From somewhere near the rear of the house came a faint sound. Soft rocking. Back and forth. Back and forth. Molly pressed both hands over her stomach, tears sliding silently into her hair. Prossert did not move. Neither of them spoke. In the distance, from deep within the palm forest, an infant's cry rose into the night. This time, it was joined by another sound. A wet, hollow clicking. Like a mouth trying to learn how to breathe. Inside her womb, something shifted once. Slowly. As though listening. Chapter 8. The Shrine of Silenced Mouths. The morning air felt heavier than usual. Even the fog seemed reluctant to move, hanging low and thick as if the village itself were holding its breath. Molly had not slept after the dream. The memory of the eyeless woman lingered like a stain behind her eyes, refusing to fade with daylight. Sanjay arrived before the sun could break through the mist. "You cannot stay inside today," the old woman said. "It has touched your dreams. That means it has learned your breath." Prossert did not argue. He helped Molly down the narrow steps, his hand hovering protectively near her elbow as though she might collapse without warning. The child inside her was silent. That frightened her more than the violent movements. They walked beyond the last row of houses, toward the palm forest. No one stopped them, no one spoke, but Molly felt eyes watching from behind shutter cracks and hanging cloth. The forest swallowed sound the moment they entered. The ground grew softer, layered with damp leaves and fine gray dust that clung to their sandals. The deeper they walked, the colder the air became. Sunlight failed to penetrate the dense canopy, leaving the world tinted in dim green shadow. Then Molly heard it. Soft knocking. Not from one direction. From many. Talk, talk, talk? Irregular, hollow, wood striking wood. They stepped into a clearing. Molly stopped breathing. A shrine stood at its center, tilted with age and neglect. Its wooden roof sagged inward, moss growing thick between warped shingles. Strips of faded cloth hung from the eaves, stiff with years of humidity and ash. But it was what hung beneath the roof that froze her in place. Dozens of small wooden dolls dangled from strings. No, not dozens. Hundreds. They swayed gently despite the still air, tapping softly against one another, producing the hollow knocking sound she had heard from the path. Each doll was crudely carved in the shape of a child. Each one had its mouth tightly bound with red thread. Molly's hand flew to her stomach. The air here felt wrong, dense, sour, saturated with the smell of old incense and something faintly sweet beneath it. Sanjay stepped forward and bowed her head. Prosert did the same, though his hesitation was visible. Molly could not look away. Some of the dolls were dark with age, their surfaces cracked and warped. Others looked newer, their wood pale, their bindings still bright red. One doll near the entrance had fresh thread, still unstained. "Do not touch them," Sanjay whispered. A thin wisp of incense smoke drifted from inside the shrine, though no one had lit anything. Molly swallowed. "What is this place?" Sanjay's fingers tightened around her prayer beads. "This is where we keep the ones who could not be born," she said. The dolls knocked softly together. "Talk, talk, talk? They wander if they are not given form," she continued. "They search for warmth, for a body, for a breath to follow." Molly felt a slow tightening deep within her abdomen. "Each doll holds a spirit?" she asked. Sanjay shook her head. "No," she said quietly. "Each doll reminds them they are not alone." The words chilled the air. From inside the shrine came a faint sound, a dry clicking, like tiny teeth tapping together. Prosert stiffened. Sanjay stepped onto the shrine platform and placed a small offering bowl near the entrance. Rice, jasmine petals, a strip of cloth. "They must be soothed," she murmured. A faint breeze stirred for the first time since they entered the clearing. The dolls began to sway more noticeably. "Talk, talk, talk, talk?" Molly felt movement inside her womb. Slow, deliberate, turning. Her breath caught. One of the dolls began to twist on its string. Not swaying, turning. Its bound mouth faced her. The red thread tightened with a faint creaking sound. Molly staggered back. "Sanjay." The old woman did not turn. "They hear the heartbeat," she said. The doll's head tilted slightly to one side. The wood creaked. Inside Molly's womb, the child shifted again, not in fear, but with a slow rolling motion, as if orienting toward the shrine. "No," Molly whispered, pressing both hands to her belly. The knocking grew louder. "Talk, talk, talk." The dolls swayed in uneven rhythm, their bound mouths facing inward toward the dark interior of the shrine. From within the dim structure came a faint, collective sound. A breath drawn by many tiny throats. Prosert grabbed Molly's arm. "We should go." Sanjay turned at last. Her expression was pale but resolute. "They cannot enter while they remain bound," she said. Her gaze dropped to Molly's stomach. "But they can call." The air grew suddenly colder. A thread on one doll snapped with a soft, dry pop. The doll dropped, striking the wooden platform with a hollow crack. "Talk." The knocking stopped. Silence flooded the clearing. No wind moved. No leaves stirred. Inside her womb, something shifted once more. Slowly. Listening. Sanjay stepped forward quickly, lifting the fallen doll and retwisting the red thread around its mouth with trembling fingers. Only when it was secured did the air loosen slightly, as though something had released a held breath. "Time to leave," she said. They walked back through the forest without speaking. But Molly felt it behind them. Not following. Not chasing. Listening. waiting for night. Inside her womb, the child remained still. And in the quiet space beneath her heartbeat, she felt a new sensation. Not movement, but attention.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 9. The night the moon turned red. The air changed before sunset. It thickened, heavy and metallic, carrying the faint scent of rain that never fell. Even the fog seemed restless, shifting in slow currents between the houses as if disturbed by something moving beneath it. Sanjay arrived before dusk, her steps hurried for the first time since Molly had known her. "Tonight you must not sleep," she said, "and you must not answer any voice you hear, no matter where it comes from." Prossert barred the door while she spoke. His hands trembled slightly as he slid the wooden beam into place. Molly sat on the mat, both hands resting over her belly. The child had been unusually quiet all day, save for slow, turning movements that felt less like motion and more like repositioning, as though listening through her flesh. "What happens tonight?" Molly asked. Sanjay did not answer immediately. She tied a white thread loosely around Molly's wrist, then another around her ankle. "The boundary weakens when the moon turns," she said at last. "They hear more clearly. They remember what they lost." Outside, darkness gathered too quickly. By the time the last strip of light vanished, the village lay submerged in deep shadow. No lamps burned, no voices spoke, even the distant forest seemed to retreat into absolute stillness. Then the moon rose. Red. Not bright, not luminous, but dull and swollen, like an ember buried beneath ash. The color spread across the fog, staining it faintly crimson. The palm trunks stood like black ribs against the bleeding sky. Inside the house, the oil lamp flickered violently. Molly felt the first movement deep within her abdomen. Slow. Deliberate. A turning from within. Her breath caught. Another movement followed, not a kick, not a stretch, but a rolling shift that traveled from one side of her womb to the other. Sanjay stiffened. "It has begun to listen," she whispered. The air grew colder. Outside, from deep within the forest, came the sound of an infant crying. Then another. Then another. The sounds overlapped, thin and distant, carried through the fog like threads pulled through fabric. Molly pressed her hands over her stomach. The baby moved again. Not violently. Responding. "No," she whispered. The crying grew louder. The charm above the door began to sway. Back and forth. Back and forth. A faint pressure built inside her abdomen, as though something pressed outward from within. Then she heard it. Not with her ears. Inside her body. A faint whisper, wet and fragile. Ma?" Molly gasped. Prossert grabbed her shoulders. "What is it?" Her voice trembled. It spoke. Sanjay's eyes widened in dread. "Do not answer," the old woman said sharply. Inside Molly's womb, the whisper came again. "Ma?" The voice did not sound like a child. It sounded unfinished, as if the shape of speech had not yet fully formed. The pressure inside her abdomen increased. A ripple passed beneath her skin, slow, searching. "Ma, open?" Molly clamped both hands over her belly, shaking her head violently. "No, no, no." The oil lamp sputtered and nearly went out. Outside, the crying intensified. It no longer sounded distant. It sounded near the house. Near the door. Near the walls. Thin wails layered over one another, forming a trembling chorus of need and hunger. The charm swung wildly. The air inside the house dropped to a biting cold. Inside her womb, something pressed upward, not outward, but toward the surface, as though seeking a path. "Ma?" A faint bulge formed beneath her skin. Prossert recoiled in horror. Sanjay began chanting, her voice low and urgent. The bulge shifted, sliding slowly across Molly's abdomen like a small head turning beneath water. "Ma, let me." The whisper gurgled, dissolving into wet clicks. Molly screamed and pressed both hands down hard, as though she could push the movement back into darkness. Sanjay's chanting rose louder, faster, each syllable striking the air like blows against an unseen barrier. Outside, something brushed the door. Then another impact. Soft. Insistent. The crying reached a piercing pitch. Dozens of thin voices overlapping into a single unbearable wail. The red moonlight seeped through the cracks in the shutters, staining the walls like diluted blood. Inside her womb, the movement convulsed violently. Then stopped. The whisper cut off mid-breath. Silence fell. Not gradually. Instantly. The charm dropped still. The air warmed slightly. Sanjay's chanting slowed, then ceased. Only Molly's ragged breathing filled the room. Prosert stared at her stomach, his face drained of color. The skin lay smooth again. No bulge. No movement. But beneath her palms, she felt something new. Not motion. Not pressure. Listening. Outside, the fog drifted slowly across the red-stained moonlight. The crying had stopped. But far beyond the houses, deep within the palm forest, a single voice remained. Soft. Patient. Waiting for the next answer. Molly closed her eyes, tears sliding silently across her temples. Inside her womb, something shifted once more. Not in fear, but in recognition. Chapter 10. The shape beneath the skin. Morning arrived pale and colorless, as though the red moon had drained the sky of life. The fog lingered low across Ban Thong, clinging to the stilts of the houses and drifting in thin currents through the empty lanes. No one spoke of the night. No doors stood open. The village behaved as if silence itself were protection. Molly had not slept. Since the whispers stopped, the child inside her had grown unnaturally still. No gentle shifting, no slow turns, only a heavy, watchful quiet beneath her heartbeat. Sanjay insisted they travel to the district clinic. You must hear a living voice tell you the child is whole, she said, otherwise fear will open doors that must remain closed. Prosert drove them out of the village just after sunrise. The moment the truck crossed the old wooden bridge, Molly felt a subtle change in the air, lighter, thinner, easier to breathe. But the weight inside her remained. The clinic stood beside a narrow paved road 20 kilometers away, its white paint peeling under the sun. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and talcum powder, an oddly comforting contrast to the damp, earthen scent of Ban Thong. A nurse led Molly into the examination room. 7 months? The doctor asked, scanning her chart. Molly nodded. Any pain? She hesitated. Pressure. Movement, different than before. The doctor smiled reassuringly. Babies change position often at this stage. He dimmed the lights and applied cool gel to her abdomen. The contact made her flinch. Relax, he said gently. The ultrasound probe touched her skin. Static crackled from the monitor. The screen flickered. Snowy interference rippled across the display. The doctor adjusted the angle. For a moment, a clear image appeared, the curve of a skull, the arc of a spine, the faint flutter of a tiny heart. There, he said, strong heartbeat. Relief tried to form in Molly's chest. Then the image warped. The outline blurred, stretching and distorting as horizontal lines of interference tore across the screen. The speaker emitted a sharp burst of static. The doctor frowned and repositioned the probe. The image returned. Normal. Then flickered again. For a fraction of a second, the shape on the screen appeared doubled, as though a second, fainter outline overlapped the first. The doctor blinked and adjusted the gain. The interference vanished. Electrical noise, he said, old equipment. Molly did not relax. The gel felt colder now, seeping into her skin. The baby's heartbeat pulsed steadily through the speaker. Then a second sound emerged beneath it. Soft. Irregular. Like a faint echo slightly out of rhythm. The doctor tapped the side of the machine. The sound disappeared. Perfectly healthy, he said, printing the image. You and the baby are doing well. Molly stared at the printout. The shape looked normal. Singular. Complete. But she could not shake the feeling that something had moved just beyond the edge of the frame. The drive back to Ban Thong felt longer. The sky dimmed as they approached the forest road. The air thickened again, pressing dampness against the windows. When the truck crossed the bridge into the village boundary, the baby moved. Not a kick. A sliding motion. Slow. Deliberate. Molly stiffened. Prossert noticed immediately. What is it? She pressed her palm against her belly. The movement traveled from her lower abdomen upward in a creeping line. Like something shifting beneath a thin layer of water. It stopped beneath her ribs. Then moved again. A slow crawling sensation spread beneath her skin. Molly's breath hitched. That isn't a kick, she whispered. The movement continued, not rhythmic. Not random, but searching. Tracing. As if mapping the boundaries of the space it occupied. When they reached the house, Sanjay waited at the foot of the stairs. Her eyes searched Molly's face before dropping to her stomach. It grows more aware, she said quietly. Inside, the air felt colder than when they had left. The charm above the door hung still. But the faint scent of damp soil had returned. Molly lay down, hoping rest might calm the unease coiling through her body. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the movement returned. A slow ripple traveled across her abdomen. Visible this time. The skin rose in a narrow ridge, sliding several centimeters before sinking again. Prossert recoiled. Molly? She stared down in horror. The ridge appeared again, moving sideways this time, pressing outward as though something inside dragged its weight beneath the surface. Not kicking. Crawling. Molly clamped her hands over her stomach. Stop, please stop? The movement froze beneath her palms. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, very slowly, something pressed back. From the inside. Not pushing outward. Responding. Her hands trembled violently as she pulled them away. The skin lay smooth once more. The baby did not move again. But in the silence that followed, Molly felt something new inside her. Not motion. Not pressure. But presence. As if the space within her womb were no longer occupied by a single life. Outside, dusk thickened over Ban Thong. From deep within the palm forest came a faint, wet clicking sound. And beneath Molly's heartbeat, something listened.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 11. The Woman Who Vanished Before Dawn. The disappearance was discovered at first light. No one rang a bell. No one shouted. In Ban Thong, news traveled through silence, through doors left ajar. Through footsteps that stopped too suddenly. Through the way neighbors avoided each other's eyes. Prossert noticed the gathering across the lane. A small crowd stood beneath the stilt house belonging to Niran and his young wife. Dao, one of the few other women in the village who was pregnant. Molly felt a tightening in her chest. She already knew. Sanjay appeared beside them, her face drawn tight with dread. They found the door open, she said. No one needed to ask whose door. Molly's hands trembled as she followed the others across the narrow path. The wooden steps creaked beneath their weight. Inside, the air was stale and damp, heavy with the lingering scent of medicinal herbs. The sleeping mat lay rumpled. A pillow rested near the wall. No signs of struggle. No overturned furniture. No broken boards. Only absence. Dao was gone. Niran sat in the corner, unmoving, his eyes hollow and unfocused. His lips moved soundlessly, repeating words no one could hear. Sanjay knelt beside the mat. Her fingers hovered above the woven surface. There was no cry, she whispered. Molly's stomach tightened. Look, someone murmured near the doorway. A dark smear marked the wooden floor near the threshold. Not a pool. A trail. Sanjay closed her eyes briefly before rising. Do not follow, she warned. No one listened. The trail descended the steps, thin and dark against the wood, then continued across the packed earth beneath the house. Blood. Not spilled. Dragged. Molly pressed her hand to her mouth. Prossert tried to guide her back, but she could not look away. The trail led toward the forest. The fog thickened between the palms, swallowing depth and distance. Each step closer seemed to dampen sound further, as though the air itself absorbed noise. The villagers stopped at the tree line. No one crossed. The trail continued beyond. Sanjay's voice trembled. We do not go in after sunrise. Molly stared at the ground. Small impressions marked the damp soil beside the blood trail. Not footprints. Handprints. Tiny. Pressed into the earth at uneven intervals. As if something had dragged itself forward using its arms. The fingers were long. Too thin. Molly felt the baby shift inside her. A slow, turning motion. Sanjay followed her gaze and inhaled sharply. On the nearest palm trunk, about knee-height, faint dark smears marked the bark. Higher up, another mark appeared. Then another. Small handprints. Climbing. Molly's pulse roared in her ears. Prossert pulled her backward. "We're leaving." No one argued. No one spoke. The villagers retreated slowly, step by step, never turning their backs to the forest. From somewhere deep within the fog-shrouded trees came a faint sound. Wet dragging. Then silence. By midday, Dao's house had been sealed. Boards nailed across the windows. A white cloth tied to the front beam. No mourning rites. No funeral. Only closure. Inside their own home, Molly sat motionless, staring at the floor. Her palms rested over her belly. The baby had grown active again, not with sharp kicks, but slow, deliberate movements that traveled from side to side, as though orienting itself toward something distant. Toward the forest. "Sanjay," Molly whispered, "what happens to them?" The old woman stood near the doorway. Her shoulders bent beneath an invisible weight. "They are not taken," she said. Molly felt dread pool in her stomach. "Then what?" Sanjay's voice fell to a fragile whisper. "They are called." The word lingered in the air. Outside, the fog drifted slowly through the stilts beneath the house. Molly's hands tightened over her abdomen. Inside, the movement slowed. Then stopped. In the stillness beneath her heartbeat, she felt it again. Not motion. Not pressure. But listening. As if something inside her had heard the call that Dao could not resist. That night, no infant cries came from the forest. No dragging sounds circled the house. The silence felt deeper than before. More complete. As though something had been taken. And something else had drawn closer. Chapter 12. The dead buried beneath the soil. Rain threatened all afternoon but never fell. Heavy clouds pressed low over Ban Thong, turning the daylight a dim, suffocating gray. The fog had retreated, yet the air felt thicker than ever, as if the sky itself had descended to rest upon the village. No one spoke of Dao. Her house remained sealed. The white cloth hanging from the beam did not stir. Molly sat near the doorway, watching the forest line. Since morning, the child inside her had moved in slow, intermittent turns, not restless, not fearful, but attentive, as though listening for a sound too distant for human ears. Sanjay arrived carrying a small clay jar wrapped in yellow cloth. Her face looked older than it had the day before. "We do not have much time," she said. Prossert stiffened. "Time for what?" Sanjay did not answer immediately. She set the jar beside the threshold and traced a thin line of ash across the wood. "The forest remembers," she murmured, "and what is remembered must be fed, or it will take what it is owed." Molly felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. "You said they are called," she whispered. "Called by what?" Sanjay's fingers trembled as she untied the cloth from the jar. Inside lay compacted gray powder mixed with fragments of brittle bone. "Long before the road reached this place," she said, "Ban Thong was only forest. The land flooded each monsoon. Crops failed, fever spread, children died before their first breath." Her voice seemed to thin beneath the weight of memory. The villagers believed a spirit ruled the deep roots of the forest, ancient, hungry, and bound to the soil. Outside, a dull wind moved through the palms for the first time that day. "They were told," Sanjay continued, "that the spirit would protect the living if it was given what belonged to the threshold between worlds." Molly's breath caught. Prossert's voice hardened. "What does that mean?" Sanjay closed her eyes. "Unborn life," she whispered. Silence filled the house. The air seemed to withdraw from Molly's lungs. "In times of plague," Sanjay said, "when a woman lost a child before birth, the small body was not cremated. It was carried into the forest and buried at the roots of the oldest trees." Molly's hands tightened over her belly. The spirit was fed, Sanjay said, and the sickness stopped. The words settled like ash. Prasert shook his head. That was long ago. Sanjay looked at him. It continued, she said. The wind outside strengthened briefly, rattling dry leaves across the ground. When floods came, when drought came, when fever returned, the offerings continued. Molly felt something inside her shift slowly, as if turning toward the sound of Sanjay's voice. Her throat tightened. But you said the ritual stopped. Sanjay nodded. 40 years ago, a monk came from the north, she said. He declared the practice an abomination. He forbade the offerings and ordered the forest shrines sealed. The faint scent of damp soil drifted through the doorway. For a time, she continued, the village prospered. The rains came gently. Children lived. Her gaze drifted toward the forest. Then the crying began. Molly's pulse quickened. Women lost pregnancies without cause. Sanjay said. Infants stopped breathing in the night. And those carrying life began to hear voices calling from the trees. Outside, the sky darkened further. The monk returned to the forest shrine. She whispered. He bound the wandering spirits, those never named, never mourned, and sealed them with thread and prayer. The image of the red-threaded dolls flashed in Molly's mind. But the spirit beneath the roots remained hungry. Sanjay said, and hunger does not forget. A faint tremor passed beneath the floorboards. Prasert looked down sharply. Molly felt a slow pressure inside her abdomen, not painful, not violent but present. So the disappearances, Molly whispered. Sanjay's voice broke. When the boundary weakens, when the moon turns, when the forest calls, those who carry life are drawn. She lowered her head. They are not taken by force. The silence that followed felt unbearable. They walk, Sanjay whispered, because something inside them answers. Molly's hands shook violently. Inside her womb, the child shifted once more. Slowly. Deliberately. As if listening to a voice too deep to be heard. Prasert's face had gone pale. Why didn't anyone leave this place? Sanjay looked toward the sealed houses beyond the lane. Those who leave, she said, dream of crying in the forest. They hear it in the cities, in the markets, in the night air. Her gaze returned to Molly. And when they carry life, the path leads them back. The clay jar trembled slightly where it sat. A faint clicking sound came from deep within the forest. Molly's breath hitched. Sanjay quickly sealed the jar and pressed her palm over the lid. We have delayed it for generations, she said, but delay is not release. The air grew colder. Outside, the palm fronds shuddered though the wind had ceased. Inside her womb, Molly felt it again. Not movement. Not pressure. But attention. As though something beneath the roots of the forest had finally turned its awareness fully toward her. Toward the child. Toward the life that had not yet chosen its breath. Dusk crept across Ban Thung like spreading ink. And in the deepening gray, the forest waited. Not with anger, but with the patient certainty of a death long overdue.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 13. When the doors opened by themselves. Dusk did not fall. It descended. A dim gray weight settled over Ban Thung long before sunset, flattening color and sound alike. The sky hung low and swollen with unmoving clouds, trapping the village beneath a suffocating stillness. No cooking fires burned. No voices drifted between houses. Even the air seemed to wait. Molly sat near the doorway, unmoving, her palms resting over the taut curve of her belly. Since Sanjay's confession, the child inside her had grown eerily quiet again, save for slow, deliberate shifts that felt less like movement and more like listening. Prasert reinforced the door beam twice. Then a third time. Sanjay knelt near the threshold, whispering prayers too softly to distinguish. Tonight, she said at last, you must not open the door. A faint tremor passed through Molly's abdomen. Outside, the last traces of daylight drained from the sky. Darkness arrived in a single breath. Then, every dog in the village began to howl. The sound erupted without warning, a rising chorus of long, Broken wails that trembled through the stilts beneath the houses and vibrated in the bones of the living. Prossert froze. Molly felt the child turn sharply inside her. The howling did not fade. It intensified, voices overlapping in a desperate, sustained cry, not barking, not warning, but mourning. Sanjay's whisper fractured. It has crossed the boundary. The oil lamp flickered violently. Outside, something moved through the fog. Not seen. Felt. A pressure in the air, like a storm front pressing inward. The howling stopped. Instantly. Silence collapsed over the village. Then the first door opened. A wooden hinge creaked somewhere across the lane. Then another. Then another. Slow. Unforced. Doors opening without hands. Prossert gripped the hammer. Stay back. Molly could hear them now, wooden panels shifting. Latches lifting, hinges sighing in the darkness. All across Ban Thong. Doors opening. Inviting. Sanjay began chanting under her breath. The charm above the doorway swung sharply, striking the wood with a dry tapping sound. Outside their house, footsteps did not approach. Instead, the fog thickened against the steps, swirling slowly as if disturbed by movement beneath its surface. Then, a sound. Infant crying. Not distant. Not from the forest. From the lane. Thin. Wet. Broken. Molly pressed both hands against her stomach. Inside her womb, the baby stirred. The crying moved closer. Not carried by footsteps. Sliding. Dragging. The sound reached the bottom step. Stopped. Silence pressed inward. Then the door beam shuddered. Prossert braced it with both hands. A soft impact touched the wood. Not forceful. Insistent. The crying resumed, now layered with faint wet clicks between each breath. Molly squeezed her eyes shut. Inside her abdomen, something shifted upward, slow, searching, responding. Sanjay's chanting grew louder. The air inside the house dropped to a biting cold. From the far side of the village came a scream. It cut off abruptly. The crying outside the door multiplied. Not one voice. Many. Thin wails overlapping, whispering through cracks in the wood. Ma? The sound did not come from outside. It came from within. Molly gasped. Her abdomen tightened as a slow bulge formed beneath her skin. Ma, open? Prossert shouted. Don't listen. The door shuddered again. The latch groaned. The beam trembled beneath pressure that felt impossibly light. Sanjay pressed both palms against the wood, chanting rapidly now, her voice breaking. They have found the heartbeat, she cried. Outside, something brushed the doorframe. Inside Molly's womb, the movement intensified, not violent, but purposeful, as though something within her leaned toward the sound. The crying rose into a piercing chorus. The charm snapped sharply against the wood. The doorbeam cracked. Prossert shouted and forced it back into place. Then, silence. Absolute. The pressure vanished. The air warmed slightly. Sanjay's chanting slowed, then stopped. No crying. No movement. No sound. Only Molly's ragged breathing. Minutes passed. No one moved. Finally, Prossert whispered, "Is it gone?" Sanjay did not answer. Her eyes remained fixed on Molly's stomach. Inside, the child shifted once more. Slow. Deliberate. Listening. Outside, the fog drifted away from the house in thin unraveling strands. But across the village, doors still stood open. And somewhere beyond the tree line, deep within the forest, a single infant cry rose, thin, patient, and certain. Sanjay closed her eyes. It knows her now, she whispered. Molly's hands trembled over her belly. She did not need to ask who. The silence that followed did not feel like safety. It felt like recognition. Chapter 14. The Birth in the Breathless Dark. The pains began before midnight. At first they came as dull tightening deep within Molly's abdomen, slow waves of pressure that rose, held, then receded. She tried to breathe through them, telling herself it was too early, that the doctor had said everything was normal. But the second wave came sharper. and the third stole the air from her lungs. Prosert knelt beside her. It's too soon. Sanjay's face had turned ashen. It is not choosing its time. The old woman whispered. The forest is. Outside, the village lay drowned in unnatural silence. No dogs barked. No insects sang. Even the palm leaves stood motionless, as if the air itself had been stilled. Another contraction seized Molly's body. She cried out, clutching the mat beneath her. Inside her womb, something moved violently, not the frantic thrashing of distress, but a powerful turning, as if forcing its way into alignment with an unseen pull. Sanjay tied white thread around Molly's wrists and ankles again, whispering prayers that trembled between urgency and fear. We cannot take her to the clinic, Prosert said. Sanjay shook her head. If she leaves the boundary now, she will not arrive as herself. The oil lamp flickered. The air grew colder. From deep within the forest came the faint sound of infant crying. One voice. Then two. Then many. The sound spread outward, carried through the fog like a rising tide. Molly screamed as another contraction tore through her. Her abdomen tightened with unnatural force, the muscles rigid beneath her skin. Prosert gripped her hand. Breathe, please breathe. She tried. The air felt thick, difficult to draw into her lungs. Outside, the crying grew louder. Closer. Not moving through the trees. Moving through the air itself. Sanjay's chanting rose louder. The charm above the door began to swing wildly, striking wood with sharp, rapid clicks. The floorboards trembled. A low vibration passed through the stilts beneath the house, traveling upward through the frame like distant thunder rolling beneath the earth. Molly gasped. Something shifted downward inside her body, heavy, undeniable. Her water broke. But the liquid that soaked the mat beneath her was darker than it should have been. Prosert froze. Sanjay did not stop chanting. Do not look away, she commanded. She must not feel abandoned. Outside, the crying reached the steps. Thin wails layered with wet clicking sounds, like tiny mouths trying to learn how to breathe. The house trembled again. Dust drifted from the rafters. Molly screamed as the next contraction tore through her with brutal force. Inside her, something pushed downward. The air turned icy. The oil flame shrank to a trembling blue point. Sanjay pressed her palm to Molly's forehead. Stay here, she whispered. Stay with the living. The crying outside multiplied. Dozens. Hundreds. A thin chorus pressing against the walls. Ma? The whisper came from everywhere at once. Molly sobbed. Make it stop. Prosert's face was streaked with tears. You're safe. You're here. The pressure inside her body became unbearable. Then. Release. A small, slick weight emerged into Sanjay's waiting hands. The crying outside stopped. Instantly. Silence crashed down. The air stilled. The vibration beneath the house ceased. Sanjay did not speak. Prosert waited, breath held, eyes wide. The newborn lay motionless in the old woman's hands. No cry. No movement. The silence stretched. Molly's heart hammered in terror. Why isn't it crying? Sanjay wiped the child's face with trembling fingers. The infant's skin was pale, not the flushed red of newborn life, but a muted gray tone, as though it had emerged from deep water rather than a living body. Seconds passed. Then the child's eyes opened. Not slowly. Not sleepily. Immediately. Fully. Its gaze fixed directly on Molly. Unblinking. Knowing. A small mouth parted. Prosert leaned forward, desperate. Cry, please? The infant did not cry. It inhaled. A thin, wet sound emerged, not quite breath. Not quite voice. Then its lips curled. Into a faint smile. Outside, deep within the palm forest, something answered. A single infant cry rose into the night. Then another. Then many. Sanjay's shoulders sagged with terrible understanding. Molly stared into her child's eyes, tears sliding silently into her hair. Inside her chest, relief and dread tangled into something she could not separate. The baby did not look away. It did not blink. Its tiny fingers curled slowly, deliberately, as if testing the weight of existence. Beyond the walls, the forest exhaled. And in the hush that followed, Ban Thung listened, as something new took its first breath. And something ancient listened in return.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 15. The Silence That Stayed Behind. Morning came without birds. No pale streaks of dawn filtered through the fog. No insects stirred beneath the house. Even the palm leaves remained motionless, suspended in a windless stillness that felt less like calm and more like aftermath. Ban Thung did not wake. It remained. Molly lay on the mat, her body hollow with exhaustion. Every muscle trembled with the memory of the night. The air inside the house had warmed, yet the cold seemed to linger beneath her skin. Beside her, wrapped in a thin cloth, the child slept. It had not cried once. Not from hunger. Not from cold. Not from light. Prosert sat nearby, unmoving, watching the infant with a vigilance that bordered on fear. He had not spoken since before sunrise. Sanjay had remained through the night. But when dawn should have come, she was gone. No one had heard her leave. No footsteps on the stairs. No creak of boards. Only absence. Near the doorway, the clay jar lay tipped on its side. A thin line of gray ash spilled across the threshold, broken as if brushed aside by something passing through. Prosert found her prayer beads resting beside it. Nothing else. Outside, doors stood open throughout the village. No voices called between houses. No cooking fires were lit. The white cloth still hung from Dao's sealed home, unmoving. It was as though Ban Thung had exhaled during the night, and forgotten to breathe again. Molly turned her head toward her child. Its eyes were open, watching her. They did not wander as newborn eyes do. They did not struggle to focus. They rested on her with quiet certainty. Her throat tightened. "Are you hungry?" she whispered. The infant did not fuss. It did not reach. It simply watched. A faint sensation moved through the air, not sound, not wind, but a subtle pressure, like the echo of something recently departed. Prosert rose and stepped outside. The fog had thinned but not vanished. The lane lay empty. A wooden shutter creaked somewhere in the distance, nudged by no visible hand. He turned back toward Molly. "Sanjay is gone," he said softly. Molly closed her eyes. She already knew. From beyond the last row of houses came the faint toll of a temple bell. One slow strike. Then silence. "The monk," Prosert whispered. But no chanting followed. No footsteps approached. Only the echo of metal fading into the heavy morning air. Molly looked down at the child again. Its small fingers curled slowly, uncurling with deliberate precision, as if testing the air, learning its weight. Outside, somewhere near the forest edge, a dog whimpered once and fell silent. The baby's lips parted. A faint wet breath slipped between them. Molly leaned closer. For a moment she thought it might finally cry. Instead, a whisper emerged, soft, unfinished, shaped more by breath than voice. "Ma?" Her heart stopped. Tears welled instantly in her eyes. "I'm here." The infant's gaze did not waver. Its tiny chest rose and fell with slow, measured breaths. Then its lips moved again. "So many." The whisper dissolved into a faint clicking sound, like small teeth tapping together. Molly's skin prickled with cold. Outside, deep within the palm forest, a thin cry rose into the morning air. Then another. And another. Not loud. Not desperate. Waiting. The baby's fingers tightened around the edge of the cloth. "They wait," the whisper breathed. Prosert stepped backward into the doorway, his face draining of color as the distant cries drifted across the silent village. Molly clutched the child closer, tears sliding down her temples. "What do they want?" she whispered. The infant's eyes remained fixed on hers. "To be born." The cries in the forest multiplied, faint, overlapping, patient. Across Ban Thong, the open doors stood like empty mouths. The fog drifted slowly through the lane, curling around the stilts and slipping beneath the houses as if searching for warmth. Molly held her child and listened to the distant chorus rising beyond the trees. She understood now. The ritual had not ended. The debt had not been forgiven. And birth was not the beginning. It was the doorway. By midday, the villagers would gather and carve new words into the weathered boundary stone near the bridge, a warning for those who might arrive, carrying life within them. No pregnant woman may leave once she has entered. That night, the forest would cry again. And within the quiet rhythm of her child's breathing, Molly would hear them, waiting, learning, and listening for their turn to be born. Outsiders believe Ban Thung is nothing more than a forgotten village. But those who have heard the crying in the forest know the truth. The unborn still wait. Waiting for breath. Waiting for a body. Waiting to be called child. And if you ever hear a baby crying in the stillness of the night, do not answer. Because some calls are not meant for the living.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.